This is the afternoon edition on RNIB's Insight Radio. 4:25 and the show coming live today from the Scottish Parliament building. We're at Holyrood in Edinburgh. All our shows coming live today. It's been a lot of fun despite the weather. We all made it. And with us on the show today, we're going to be chatting to a couple of the MSPs here at the Scottish Parliament. And joining me at the moment is Ruth Davidson. Ruth is the, can we still say newly elected leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth?
Absolutely, yes you can.
Congratulations on the post. So how long has it been now?
Oh, it's been about 5 weeks now, so I've been keeping myself busy. And I'd just like to say before we start, if I can, Alan, thank you so much for coming to the Scottish Parliament today. I know that Insight Radio, although it has its studios in my patch, the area I represent in Glasgow, that you broadcast not just across Scotland and across the whole of the UK, but also because of the different platforms that you broadcast to right across the world. So it's a real honour for us to have Insight here today in the Scottish Parliament to talk about some of the work that we do.
It's nice to be let out of the studio now and again as well, I have to say. How long have you been in politics, Ruth?
Well, I used to work in journalism, where I was at the BBC, and I did quite a lot of political reporting. So I've been in or around politics for about the last 10 years. But in terms of being an elected politician, I was only elected to the Scottish Parliament in May of this year. So I'm fairly new to being an MSP, as well as very new to being the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party.
Quite a meteoric rise.
Well, I think there was lots of things that I discussed during the leadership contest about where I believe our party in Scotland need to go, some of the issues that we need to tackle and some of the changes that we need to make. And I'm very pleased that the party put their trust in me to take the party forward in this way. And I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing to have a sort of a fresh perspective on the party itself and what we can offer the people of Scotland.
Is the Scottish Parliament an exciting place to be as an MSP? Do you really feel that there's a lot of difference you can make?
Well, absolutely. I mean, some of the way in which devolved government in Scotland works, and this is probably for the benefit of some of your listeners down south as well as up here, is the competencies, the things that we have control over here in Scotland are things like policing and justice issues, things like schools and looking after young people, things like health service, all of the health services, things like public services, local councils, all the services that they put forward. So in terms of what we affect in people's everyday life, there's a whole scope of things there that we can do to make people's lives better. And, you know, I think that it's an incredibly vibrant place to work, the Scottish Parliament. I think particularly now when there are some big questions hanging over Scotland, talking about what the makeup of Scotland's going to be, what its constitutional future is going to be, now's an incredibly exciting time to be involved in politics in Scotland.
And all that's going on within Europe as well with the euro.
Well, absolutely. And I think there are questions to be asked there about what our relationship with Europe should be and what our relationship with Europe would be were we to vote in a referendum to have an independent Scotland. And I think this idea that we want Britain out but Brussels in has huge dangers for us. And I think that Scotland is very much better off as part of the United Kingdom, better off in Britain. And I think that Britain benefits a huge amount from having Scotland as part of that United Kingdom. And I think we only need to look across the water to what's going on with the euro, with some of the finance issues. There's a summit that's on today talking about euro countries having to come much closer together in terms of harmonising some tax issues, whether that makes them more or less competitive. If Scotland were to go independent and have to become what's called an accession country, like some of the newer members of the EU, they would have to take on the euro. And you know, this is a real issue and one that people are going to have to consider when they cast their vote.
The Parliament itself is very young. Has it made...
I like to call it fledgling.
Fledgling. It's a fledgling Parliament.
Yes.
It's not quite flown the nest yet, maybe. Has it made a huge difference in the time that it's been running to the people in Scotland?
Well, I think it has. I think that some people maybe don't recognise all of the areas that have changed because of having a Scottish Parliament. But I still think that in terms of where people see the value of the Parliament, they really do recognise it. I mean, I think certainly in terms of the media reports that we have, yes, you'll hear things in the television and on radio, and you'll see things in the newspapers about what the Chancellor is doing in Westminster, what the Defence Secretary is doing, what the UK is doing on the world stage. But you'll also get a lot of reporting about people like Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon and what they're doing in Scotland in terms of education and health and all the rest of it. So I think Scotland has absorbed the change that devolved government has brought very easily. and doesn't think twice about talking about George Osborne and David Cameron, but also talking about Nicola Sturgeon, Alex Salmond, and dare I say it, some of the opposition parties in the Scottish Parliament as well, like the Scottish Conservatives.
Has the party, or should I say, has the government itself, in your opinion, made it a big difference to, our listeners are blind and partially sighted in the whole. Do you think the Parliament has made a difference to the way that their lives have sort of progressed over the years?
Well, this is one of the areas, talking about blind and partially sighted people, and actually people with different disabilities, impairments, different special needs, which actually straddles two stools, because things like the allocation of resources to support organisations, that can come from the Scottish Parliament, but things like welfare and disability payments, they come from the UK government. So there's lots of different areas, and what I want to see going on in Scotland is that we learn from what's going on, not just in the rest of the UK, but in the rest of the world. So, for example, in England, they're piloting something like audio buses. So it's like the trains. So if you're on the bus, you know exactly where you're going to get off next because it's being spoken rather than just put up in LED lights. We don't have that in Scotland, but maybe that's something that we should look to and bring up here as well. And that's something that's within the competency of the Scottish Parliament and something we should be looking at introducing.
I mean, visual impairment itself, as you say, you're talking about travel there. I think we're very fortunate in Scotland in that, for say myself, being registered blind, a guide dog owner, that I can travel anywhere in Scotland on public transport free of charge 24/7. And that, I think, for me personally, has been a huge sort of boost to independence for me.
Well, it is. And I think what's important when you're talking about something like being visually impaired is that what we need to make sure that we have in Scotland, or indeed across the whole of the UK, is that we have the equality of opportunity. So the same educational opportunities for people who are blind or partially sighted, the same job opportunities for people who are blind and partially sighted, and artificial barriers aren't put in the way. And that's what we've got to work towards. And that's what's incumbent on me as an elected representative, to make sure that we are making happen for people who are blind and partially sighted across the country.
And what about yourself personally, Ruth? I mean, what's your kind of experience of visual impairment?
Well, I don't have any history of it in my family. I'm very lucky that way. But I have some history of dealing with Insight Radio. I used to volunteer before I became a politician for a brief period. And one of the very loveliest things that I've been able to do in my time as an MSP was when the Parliament had its state opening and the Queen came. Every member of Parliament was allowed to invite something called a local hero, somebody that made a difference in their own community, to come and be part of all of the celebrations. And there was a big procession and the Queen was there and all the rest of it. And I invited one of your volunteers, a chap called Wilson Bain, who helps read the papers of a morning, and your listeners will know him, to come and be part of a very big civic occasion in Scotland. And I think that the difference that your radio station makes for blind and partially sighted people is a huge difference. I'm very supportive of what you do, and I think that unsung heroes and volunteers like Wilson are exactly the sort of people who should be recognised by the Scottish Parliament.
And you'll remember and tell all your fellow MSPs about us as well.
Absolutely, always. I'm always happy to bang the drum for Insight Radio.
Fantastic. Ruth Davidson, thank you for speaking with us on Insight Radio.